there was a suspension that took place and what have you. I want you to talk about that a little.
They continue to play. Like it didn't seem, I guess first the referee should be hyper vigilant to matchups, but also to games and to also players.
Playing in Caitlin Clark's direction, so that's going to build some resentment. But on the other hand, a rising tide.
Normal. But what people don't understand is that, like, I played basketball. I started playing when I was 10. I'm 34. So that's 24 years of me seeing the women's game in real, be challenged consistently and forced to like maybe add more muscle to level.
But let me ask you this. I never asked you this before. You talked about that sisterhood.
Yeah.
Stephen A. Smith opens this conversation the only way you can right now, bringing up the fist to Caitlin Clark's throat and the suspension that followed, and asking his guest point-blank whether the punishment was actually appropriate. That's the right question to lead with, because everything else in this conversation about resentment and targeting only makes sense once you're anchored back to the actual incident that kicked all of it off.
It's happy, right? But even though we are having these imperatives, people, like, the game doesn't feel like it's in control. The WNBA is known consistently to be physical, but you have more fouls. But do those fouls mean that you are in control of the game? And I feel like in that instance, because we haven't had a good precedent set, or at least an area of emphasis to make sure, like, in these matchups, in these scenarios, how do we maintain control? Now it puts the league in a position to do something that it rarely does. And did the league have every right to do so when they see contact above the shoulders? Absolutely. But it was kind of like a snowball effect that I think, had greater implications because of the players involved, because of.
And Shiny Ogwumike doesn't dodge it. She says flat out that any contact above the head or to the neck area is out of bounds, full stop, not okay, no matter how normal falling to the ground looks in the flow of a basketball game. I think that's the most important soundbite in this entire segment, because you've got a respected ESPN analyst, someone who played and covers this league at the highest level, saying there's no gray area on the actual contact itself.
You see the slow-mos and the replays and the freeze frames. That's when you see, like, there was contact that happened. And I think it's first and foremost very important to note that any contact that happens above the head, to the head, we've seen people take elbows to the face. And in this instance, you see the fist to the neck area. All of that is out of bounds. It's not okay, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think that this situation here, given the nature of the flow of the game, that both of the players got up, they continue to play. Like, it didn't seem, I guess first I should say this, the referee should be hyper vigilant to matchups, but also.
Where this gets more interesting is her point about officiating philosophy. She's saying the WNBA has been deliberately calling more fouls this season to protect shooters and increase freedom of movement, chasing the same evolution the NBA went through a decade or two ago to boost scoring and fan interest. That's a legitimate structural explanation for why this incident became such a big deal. Separate from any conversation about Clark specifically, more fouls called doesn't automatically mean more control of the game, and that's exactly the tension that blew up here.
Before I get into some NBA stuff with you, obviously Caitlin Clark made a lot of news last week. When she got a fist to the throat. We all know that. There was a suspension that took place and what have you. I want you to talk about that a little bit. When you saw that incident, went through your mind. Did you think the punishment was appropriate? Your thoughts, first of all.
Yeah. So in game flow of watching that game, I didn't notice much. Very similar to anybody watching.
She says the league had every right to upgrade this to a flagrant and suspend Alyssa Thomas, but that it snowballed into something bigger because of who the players involved were and the narratives already swirling around them. That's an honest, uncomfortable acknowledgement. The exact same contact probably doesn't become a national story if it's two role players nobody's heard of.
Forwards, all three of you do. And so when I took the position last year, when there was some Caitlin Clark issues, like, listen, there's some jealousy. It's not everybody. It's not most, but there's some resentment there. On one hand, I understood it because I said, hey, you know what? There's ladies that's been in this league for years that did everything they could to uplift and build the sport to this point, and then everybody wants to throw all the praise and all the acclaim in Caitlin Clark's direction. So that's going to build some resentment. But on the other hand,
then Stephen A. gets into it directly. He says there's some jealousy, not from everybody, not from most players, but real resentment toward Clark, from people who built this league for years and are now watching all the praise flow one direction. He compares it to Magic Johnson and Larry Bird riding the Michael Jordan wave instead of resenting it, and honestly, that's been Smith's exact message for weeks now. Rising tide lifts all boats, and if you fight that wave instead of riding it, you're the one who loses.
To the face, and in this instance, you see the fist to the neck area. All of that is out of bounds. It's not okay, right? But I do think that this situation here, given the nature of the flow of the game, that both of the players got up, they continue to play. Like it didn't seem, I guess first I should say this, the referee should be.
Chinese response here is sharp. She points to the NBA draft, where every rookie says they're going to spend their career trying to prove why they deserve to go higher than the guy picked first. Trying to knock off the top dog is completely normal in sports. That's a fair, level-headed way to reframe some of this instead of jumping straight to conspiracy.
A lot of them, most of them white, come up and go like this. What they're doing to that girl, then they start talking about Caitlin Clark. And there's a racial dynamic to it that they believe. I'm not saying it's accurate, but they believe that that plays a role, that this white girl showing up on a...
But then she goes deeper. She brings up Skylar Diggins coming out of Notre Dame as the it girl of her era, getting the Drake cosign, the celebrity attention, and then getting hit with exactly this kind of physicality and toughness testing once she got to the league. 24 years of watching women's basketball up close, and she's saying this pattern isn't new, it's just that a lot of newer fans have never seen it play out before.
Because of the players involved, because of the narratives that were coming out. And so I think like it's just tough because being an analyst, it's like these hot and button issues that the players, you know, in some ways have moved on from because it's a long season. There are more games. I mean, I followed the next Indiana Fever game because my sister was playing against, you know, the Indiana Fever. Like players move on because these things tend to happen in sports and the league has every reason to adjudicate what they see fit. But it just feels like it's a little bit tough because in our conversations stick. And our conversations are either doors opening or doors closing to missing, I guess, some of the magic of what we're experiencing.
She also makes a point that deserves way more attention than it's getting. Every player who takes smoke has the right to dish it back and defend herself, and it's not foreign to see someone in the top position get challenged consistently, forced to add muscle, build a supporting cast around her. That's not an excuse for a fist to the throat, but it is real context for how competitive, physical pushback against a rising star has always worked in this league.
He's like, listen, there's some jealousy. It's not everybody. It's not most, but there's some resentment there. On one hand, I understood it because I said, hey, you know what? There's ladies that's been in this league for years that did everything they could to uplift and build the sport to this point, and then everybody wants to throw all the praise and all the acclaim in Caitlin Clark's direction, so that's going to build some resentment. But on the other hand, a rising tide lifts all boats. And just like folks in the NBA rode that Magic Johnson, Larry Bird wave, and then they ultimately rode the Michael Jordan wave, that's what these...
And this is where Stephen A. brings up something a lot of hosts won't say out loud. Traveling the country, he says most of the people who come up to him, bringing up what they're doing to that girl, are white, and there's a racial dynamic that a lot of fans genuinely believe is playing a role here, even though he's careful to say he's not claiming it's accurate, just that it's a real perception out there.
I think it's first and foremost very important to note that any contact that happens above the head, to the head, we've seen people take elbows to the face. And in this instance, you see the fist to the neck area. All of that is out of bounds. It's not okay, right? But I do think that this situation here, given the nature of the flow of the game, that both of the players got up, they continue to play. Like it didn't seem, I guess first I should say this. The referee should be hyper vigilant to matchups, but also to games and to also players. And in that instance, when you see a team that just went, and I believe there were 5 technicals in the game that they matched up 2 days prior, they should have a hype.
He backs that up with the money angle. Under the league's new collective bargaining agreement, standard salaries are still capped nowhere close to what Clark reportedly pulls in, something like $16 million once you count her endorsements. A lot of fans believe that gap is a real source of resentment, and whether or not you buy the racial framing, the financial disparity conversation is at least grounded in something concrete.
Gender that I am, or is it just analysis?
It's analysis, but you're so intelligent that when it's called for you to bring the perspective that your ethnicity automatically is attached to, you can do that. That your gender is automatically attached to, you can do that too. Of course, you're objective, but you also are very adroit at providing a level of perspective that most.
Chiney pushes back on some of that with a really thoughtful point about societal double standards. Women competing at the highest level are held to a different expectation of how they're allowed to compete than men are, and she's honest that if she were guarding a Ja Wilson, she'd be trying to shut her down too, because that's literally how you elevate your own game. That's a much more nuanced take than just, it's jealousy, or it's racism. It's actually about what competitive respect looks like in women's sports specifically.
Of course, you're objective, but you also are very adroit at providing a level of perspective that most, like, for example, if I'm debating you, there are times that you'll go the ladies route. And I'm like this, well, wait a minute, damn, I'm a lot of things, but I ain't a woman. You understand? I don't know what she knows about the ladies. So I got to listen to you in that perspective, and it's healthy. So I don't mind at all. But let me ask you this. I never asked you this before. You talked about that sisterhood.
Yeah.
What do you think is the difference between a sisterhood?
And she closes this stretch by pointing back to the business case. She was in Clark's comments the day she dropped her signature shoe, hyping it up. Because a rising tide really does lift every player in this league, Angel Reese included, with her own fashion and clothing deals. That's the version of this conversation that actually matters going forward. Less, is she being targeted? More, is this league going to build around the attention she's bringing, or keep fighting it?
Up, to have teammates that back them up. This is something that I see in multiple instances in sport, in women's basketball, also as someone that studies the NBA. And I want to lastly say this, like, we have these positions and I try my best to be like, analytical and fair and speak to many perspectives. I know Caitlin, and Caitlin loves